Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho. And now I have a machine gun. Wait, that's the wrong Christmas movie. Hello, friends. This is Matt, and this is the Don't Go Out Onto the Moors podcast, where we look at British genre cinema, not just for its cinematic qualities alone, but to interrogate the societies and universes that they were made in. And this is sort of our Christmas episode. And I really want to thank Paul for picking this one because the film we're going to discuss tonight, 1961's Cash on Demand, is, well, it's one of my Christmas movies, along with, the aforementioned Die Hard, Stalag 17, the various versions of A Christmas Carol, which this film might kind of be a version of A Christmas Carol. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. Uh, but it is a film which I believe is criminally underrated and criminally underseen. So I want to thank you, Paul, for picking this one. Uh, I am joined tonight only by Paul. Dina, who I recorded a short on Spanish genre cinema about a month ago. She unfortunately had a last minute engagement she had to attend to, so she'll be missed. And Cameron. Cameron is going to be on effectively indefinite sabbatical to the podcast. He wanted me to let everybody know that he's doing the best he can. He wants to apologize because he was not firing on all cylinders the first go around. But he's going through some stuff right now, and we're thinking about you, homie. So get well, and I'm gonna try to do something with him, maybe independently, like a short at some point after the new year. But we'll see where all that goes. Uh anyway, Paul, how you been doing?
I'm doing all right. Just getting ready for the holiday. Just trying to get through work and everything else, and just you
Is
know.
the Historical Society doing anything special for the holiday?
Oh, actually, yeah. Now that you mention it, we are doing a holiday. We call it our Delco Winter Social. It's a holiday fundraiser that we do. We usually do this at the end of the year, where we like to have like a little holiday party with friends and people and stuff like that. So we're going to have this at Warehouse 3 in Swarthmore with Joe Jack Talcum for the Dead Milkmen playing. And
Is this going to be the same location that you guys did last year?
correct, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And in Swarthmore. And you have food, drink, prizes, all sorts of goodies. So it should be a good time. It's from like 7 to 9. So it should be fun. That'll be a great way to just kind of cap the work load, and then it's
And
drips and
what
drabs until January.
and what date is that again?
Sunday, December 21st.
So if this is out before the 21st, you guys should all check that out. And
Hell yeah, come down.
being that it's in Swarthmore, I may make an appearance.
Hell yeah,
Uh,
come on out.
I might be seeing you. Uh, Excellent. I am well. My fall semester is 100% over, thank God.
Thank
Uh,
God.
I caught the usual end of the fall semester head cold from hell. Uh, and so I'm on the mend now. I can hear shit for the first time in like a week and a half, which is nice. Every year, I will go through the whole fall semester. My students are dropping like flies. I'm
Yeah.
literally my last day of class was 2 weeks from today. It was the first Wednesday of the month. Wednesday evening, I start having a scratchy throat. And yeah, my immune system's like, oh, I did all this work for 3 months. Yeah, you're off
Shutting
now?
down.
Fuck you. So I'm glad to be, on the mend, and well. And yeah, looking forward to the holidays, man. Uh, Doing a little bit of traveling, gonna be seeing friends, hopefully
Nice.
when your dear wife. Uh, before I allow you to introduce tonight's film,
Yes.
one little thing of business or maybe of note. I posted it up on the socials, which, by the way, we have a Facebook page. It's a lame Facebook page, but it's a Facebook page. It's real. And we have a Instagram account, which is also real. Apparently, Hammer Films, which it's I think it's really interesting that this is our first Hammer film, but it's like in some ways the most atypical of what a lot of people think of as a Hammer film. Uh, so Hammer Films, they bought the rights to a lot of their back catalog, and so they're releasing Blu-rays, upgraded Blu-ray releases of a lot of their old titles, particularly the like pre-Curse of Frankenstein stuff. So like
Oh
the
wow.
yeah, so like the early 50s Hammer Noir stuff, which those are interesting little movies, and maybe we want to tackle one of those one of these days. Uh,
Okay.
but this week they released something very interesting. So they didn't just buy the rights to release some of their older stuff. They also apparently bought the rights to release other people's shit. So there's going to be a series, and the first title's been announced. It's called The Hammer Presents Collection, which is a collection of non-Hammer British horror films from
Interesting.
the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so the first title is 1971's Cry of the Banshee. Paul, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, no, I think I know that movie. Did we watch that together at one point?
We may have watched that when you were chilling at my crib.
Yeah.
It's kind of the witch. By the way, it has fuck all to do with banshees.
Okay.
There is no banshee. Uh, it is effectively the Witchfinder General, and
Okay.
Ice plays, the witch hunter. Uh, but also a landed aristocrat. Uh, except if the Witchfinder General had actual supernatural witches.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
It's not a perfect film. Witchfinder General, I think, is way superior. It's a
True.
flop film, but it's a very interesting film done by a very interesting director, Gordon
Yeah.
Hess. And the title animation was done by a dear friend of ours, Paul. A certain guy, an American from Minnesota, actually, who was in
Is it
Britain.
Terry Gilliam?
It is Terry Gilliam. Terry
No
Gilliam
way. Really?
credit animation. It's a really interesting film. Might want to check it out. It is a British only release, so it's a region 2. But if you're like me, you have a region free player, so that doesn't stop you. Uh,
Okay.
and I'm interested to see what they do with this, especially because I mentioned on the socials. So when you think British, particularly horror of this period, you think Hammer, obviously, you think Amicus.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you think Tygon, but there was kind of a fourth wheel. Kevin Francis, who is the son of Freddie Francis, the director, uh, formed a little company called Tyburn, and he named it after the hill Tyburn outside of London, where they used to hang people. And
Right.
the company got started in the late 70s, just when the British horror boom is kind of dying, and the British film industries really hit the shits. Uh, and so he wanted to sort of take on the mantle that Hammer was, leaving. He only did 3 movies. They vary incredibly in quality, but they've been completely unavailable for any kind of official releases
Hmm.
because Kevin Francis, for whatever reason, I guess thinks his company's gonna like rise from the grave after like 40
Okay.
years or something. But he's getting old. And I
Oh,
do wonder if Hammer may have, approached him and been like, hey, if you want to make some coin on these,
now's the time.
sell us the
Yeah.
rights. We can. So I'm very curious to see if those titles are amongst the ones they're planning on releasing.
Okay.
Because they did 2 with Peter Cushing, Legend of the Werewolf, which is effectively a remake of Curse of the Werewolf, which is a adaptation of Guy Endor's The Werewolf of Paris,
Mm-hmm.
and The Ghoul, which is
Okay.
it's kind of the reptile in disguise, but it's
Ah.
really interesting. A great performance by Peter Cushing, and a very interesting performance by a Painfully Young John Hurt.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, these films, like I said, they vary in quality, but they are potentially of interest, particularly if you're listening to a podcast like this one.
Okay, interesting.
So let's get started, shall we? Paul, this is your pick. Why did you pick this movie? Explain it, and then we can start talking a little bit about the film itself.
So I was first introduced to this film just over a year ago by you, where you showed me this movie. Um, I really love Peter Cushing. I think he's a brilliant actor, and I love Andre Morel. So when you told me it was that combo, I thought that's interesting. And then when you explained to me what the film was about, I really had to take a moment to think, like, well, is this a Hammer film? And
Yeah,
then
well,
watching it, you can tell it has some aesthetic to Hammer. But the reason why I chose it was one, because I thought, well, if it's Christmas time, there's no better, like, for me, British classic Christmas film like this. And I also found that, as you put it earlier, it's really underviewed. So I thought it'd be really good to kind of give it a leg up. And it's a really good story. I think it's a really effective film where the writing is really good, the acting and cast is really good. It has really good drama and action and drive to it without like having to fire a gun. And I love when a
yes.
movie is able to pull that off where you're suspended in like, oh, are they gonna like what's gonna happen? And nothing violent, or at least actively violent, is happening. There's violence, but there's nothing where it's like, you know, a grotesque. It's such a subtle film, and I think for Cushing as an actor, it really highlights a lot of the best qualities he could put into a character. Because I find that when he does something like Victor Frankenstein or Van Helsing or any number of other things we've seen him in Hammer films, he tends to, and not this isn't to knock his acting, but the characters he's given are usually like two dimensional, where they kind of have
It's
one or two.
different shades of the same riff, and very
Exactly,
similar to the kind of roles they were giving Christopher Lee. It's
exactly.
like,
And in this film, you see a whole range of emotions this character goes through, from being really just a prick and just very uptight to then being vulnerable to then even having some humor and levity. There's this great range he's able to produce with it. So, yeah, I thought this was a perfect film for the holidays. It's kind of like a Scrooge Christmas Carol story, as we discussed. We can get into that a bit later, but um, yeah,
when you chose this one, I was so thrilled because, like Paul said, this is still, I think, a very underrated and underseen film. Uh, Even by fans of Hammer, and maybe that's because it is so atypically Hammer. It's not your usual Hammer film, but
no,
part of the mission statement of this podcast is, look, we're going to tackle the titles we all know, but we're also here to talk about that stuff that slips under the cracks. And
right.
this definitely fulfills that sort of requirement. For those of you who are new to this film, uh, it is an adaptation of a 1960 Associated TV Theater 70 teleplay, The Gold Inside, written by Jacques Geller, and it had the film which came out the following year, 1961. Well, came out some places. We'll talk a little bit about that. Uh, Same director, Quentin Lawrence, who mainly did TV, and Andre Morel and Richard Vernon returned
Mm-hmm.
to the film version in the same roles. Uh, the plot is, I'm going to just do this in a nutshell. Uh, Peter Cushing plays a bank manager of a small rural, I think they say is it the southeast or the southwest?
They only really mention that it's in the provinces.
Yeah,
It's outside London.
It's somewhere in the boondocks,
Yeah.
by the name of Fordyce. And we'll get more into this when we talk about what we like about the film, the themes, etc. Uh, but he is, as Paul so eloquently put it, a prick. Right? He is the worst kind of manager. But 2 days before Christmas, uh, right as the bank is having its largest deposits in its safes, because of the holiday, because there is a local industrial concern and they pay out all of their workers. And presumably, this is early 60s Britain. Socialism, yay, is alive and well in that country. So you'd get two paychecks. Right. 2 days before Christmas, a Colonel Gore Hepburn, or at least that's who we think he is, comes to pay them a visit for a security check. As it turns out, the colonel is not with an insurance company on a routine check. He is, in fact, a very suave. I believe someone asked me because I posted the picture when I was watching this of the title on Facebook, and they were like, "How is this?" And I gave a basic description. I believe I referred to him as a slick ass London bank robber.
Mm.
Uh, he comes to pay them a visit, and we are led to believe that he has Peter Cushing's wife and his son held hostage. And Colonel Gore Hepburn, Andre Morell's character, is going to try to make it off with 90,000 pounds. Which in 1960s terms, that's a lot of freaking money, guys.
Mhm.
And the film simply follows the heist, and we'll again talk a little bit more about this. By the end of the film, you see in Cushing's character a definitive transformation. So, let's get into a little bit of the production history. This was based off of a teleplay, which I gotta keep it real. This is kind of how Hammer made its chops in the first place. Because if you think about, their sort of rise in the mid 60s, it's largely through adaptations of television work.
Yeah.
Quatermass films, obviously, they were based off of BBC teleplays. And another film which I recently rewatched, uh, The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, with Cushing, which was an adaptation of The Creature. Uh,
Mm.
so Hammer, this is not their first rodeo with TV adaptations. One of the reasons I think they liked doing these too, though, is so the budget of this film was 30,000 pounds.
Mm.
By the way, it's less than the amount of money that, they steal. One thing about Hammer from jump until the bitter end was, and this is not a knock, because we'll talk about how they made these things work. Yo, Hammer was fucking cheap, man. They
Yes.
liked bringing in product on time and on budget. And so something that's set in a relatively confined space without much set design, uh, that fits the bill. And I think in terms of, you had said obviously the screenplay is excellent, but give it up to the cinematographer Arthur Grange
Yeah.
and the set designer Bernard Robinson. Because for a film with such a small budget, and again, such a constricted kind of space, this looks a lot better, bigger, more polished than it probably could have been. And indeed, Christopher Lee, in several emails, referred to the set designer Bernard Robinson and, the Hammer backroom staff uh, as the real stars of Hammer. And I think there's a case to be made about that because these guys took not a lot and made things look, like a big studio, big budgeted film. The director, Quentin Lawrence. Paul, had you seen anything else that he ever did? Or
Not off the top of my head, no.
So I did some digging. He did mostly television work, which makes sense. Then he was brought over from television to direct this adaptation. Uh, he did direct two films of some note. The Trollenberg Terror, which I brought up in our first episode, for Monty Berman and Baker. And he also directed for Hammer The Secret of Blood Island. Are you
Huh.
hip to this? So The
No.
Secret of Blood Island, it sounds like a pirate movie, but it's not. It's all I can say is it's World War II Japanese POW camp exploitation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
I see where the blood comes in.
it's not bad, but it's watching it from today's day and age and watching Michael Ripper and all of these British character actors, in yellowface
Uh,
is a little jarring.
that's a little jarring.
I'm gonna keep it real. Uh the cast, obviously you have Peter Cushing, who I think if you can only think of Peter Cushing as Baron Frankenstein, as Van Helsing, as, I don't know, Grand Moff Tarkin from the Star Wars, you should really see this film. Uh,
Yes, I agree.
his range is, like you said, fantastic. And I think this is low key one of his best performances for Hammer.
Yes.
But it's funny. Last time out, we did a film, The Flesh and the Fiends, where Peter Cushing is the headliner. Yet he gets upstaged by his co-star.
I would agree. Yeah, Andre Morel.
Yeah, in that film it was Donald Pleasance. This time it's Andre Morel as we don't really ever know his real name.
No.
Colonel Gore Hepburn. Let's just say that. Uh Andre Morel is my guy. He's my Dr. Watson, by the way. So
That's right.
just 2 years earlier, him and Cushing had teamed up in Hammer's The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is it totally true to type of Conan Doyle source material? No, but it's really goddamn good, and you should all
It's a
see
good
it.
movie. Yeah.
And Morel does a great job as Dr. Watson because unlike Nigel Bruce or some other actors that played the role, he doesn't play it as a bumbling idiot.
Right.
He is the Watson of canon. Right. Uh, Morel worked extensively, not just for Hammer, but in British cinema in general. I had forgotten about this. He has a small role in Bridge over the River Kwai.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the British
I haven't seen that in
colonel.
forever.
He's the British colonel that recruits effectively the suicide mission to go blow up the bridge.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yes.
I had forgotten he was in that, which also says, hey, I should rewatch that movie too.
Same.
Uh,
Yeah.
he's in Hammer's The Hound of the Baskervilles. He's in one of maybe my favorite Hammer film of all time, The Plague of the Zombies. Uh,
Mm.
and he's in The Mummy Shroud, and he's in She, and talking about white guys getting like makeup up. He plays an Arab gentleman, and it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
He got shoe polish on his face, and his voice is not his voice. They borrowed George Pastel's voice because I guess
Okay.
or exotic, oriental. I don't know. But he was a British character actor. Uh, he everything I've ever seen him in, he does a job. He's always solid, and when he's at his best, he can really rise to the occasion, which I think he does here. In terms of the rest of the cast, there's only really one other person I think that I have down in my notes, and that's Richard Vernon, who plays
Same.
Peterson, who's Fordyce's number two. Paul, have you ever seen him before?
Yeah. Wait. I remember looking up. Just trying to remember what I saw him in. Shit, I can't remember. You don't have to remind me.
So every time I watch this movie, he drives me nuts because I'm
Yeah.
like, I know this guy. And if you look at his, IMDb, there's all these television credits, etc. but he's the dude from Goldfinger.
Okay.
Brings MI5 the hey, there's this guy Auric Goldfinger. We think he's shady. Can you send 007 to like check his ass out? That's where I remember him from because I'm like, I know
Okay.
this guy, I know this guy, and then I went to the his film credits and I was like, that's it, he's the dude from Goldfinger. So the film was released. Well, I'll say Hammer at this time. Again, this is post Curse of Frankenstein. They have U.S. financial backing. And so this film was one of several films that was distributed internationally for them by Columbia. Uh, so it is distributed by Columbia. It is released on December 20th, 1961 in the United States, right before Christmas. Makes sense. For whatever goddamn reason, the film does not get its domestic British premiere until December 13th, 1963. Now, I went through the internet, I went through all of my Hammer related source material to try to figure out why this is. No one knows why the F this is. Which is kind of weird. The film got released in the United States almost 2 full years before it got a domestic release. And again, nor do I want to even speculate about why, but that is kind of strange. Uh, the film, as we said, is criminally underseen. However, if you look at reviews from the time and reviews later on, it generally got good notices. Uh,
Yeah.
it did not do all that well financially, but I think it's because this film was a victim of this is a Hammer film. People go into the theater and they're like, "What the f is this?" Right? Because as by 1961, the sort of brand of Hammer is already a thing. And films like this, unfortunately, when Hammer strayed off of the Gothic path, unfortunately, they did a lot of really good stuff, but the stuff kind of got undervalued and undernoticed until years later. Uh, I will say this though, Stephen Crimble, uh, referred to the film again much later as one of the best British B films of the period. And I would agree with that. I would agree with that. So with that being said, let's discuss the film itself. Paul, I'm going to throw the ball in your court. What do you want to talk about? What do you think worked? What do you think didn't work? And we'll take it from there.
Well, just a couple notes I had about what I looked up with the production and just a
Oh,
few other things that kind of like talked about the film. So, and just kind of piggybacking on some of the things you said about first, Cushion was, as what I understood, he was thrilled to do this film because he was really looking forward to doing something like this. And he described his character really well, I thought, where he said he was a marionette, a man who lacks charity and warmth, and derives satisfaction from the threat of dismissal to his employees. Um, I also want to talk about that delay, the delay in release. So
uh-huh.
there was something you talked about earlier with the 30,000 pounds and how for Hammer that was really cheap. I would say overall in the British film industry during that time that it never mattered the quality. It just mattered if it was on time and under budget. If it was on time and under budget to people in charge, it was a wild success. And I have a strange feeling that like the reason for the delay was because of those same people. They had something lined up, and they're like, "Well, wait, hold on, we can't, you can't. We'll push it. We'll push it back."
I
So,
also I
well,
also wonder too because it got an American release first, didn't do so hot in the States.
no,
Maybe they were a little skittish about releasing
yes,
it in the home markets.
quite true. I also so real quick talking about the cinematography. So there was something I really appreciated with the very first opening credits was that you notice that what they're doing is they are taking you through the scenes and setting. Here's
Hmm.
where everything is going to take place, and here's. But what you also notice upon watching it one or two times is that so they start with a wide shot where it's outside, and then they lead every shot down eventually to the vault. So the space that where these things are occurring are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and
More
smaller.
confined, more confined.
And there's a thing they did with the cinematography that when the heat was on, when it was tense, when they had really tight close shots on really tight close spaces. And I thought that that kind of in a way in a kind of a subconscious way was talking about the pressure being built up. What is Fordyce going to do? Is he going to do something drastic? He's under pressure. He's caught. He's trapped. He's constantly being trapped, and the space they're going from is smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So I thought that was a really interesting thing on how the cinematography worked in that way. And then what was really funny to me was the very first shot of the film
Oh,
is
yeah, I have this in my
is
notes.
Santa Claus ringing the bell for charity, and
Give this holiday.
he's outside of a bank,
Yep.
and he's asking for money. So it was that I thought was like, okay, here's the juxtaposition where charity is outside in the cold, inside the bank is cold business. It's just
Yes.
unfeeling. You and then we know it's the day before Christmas Eve, so everyone's in a festive atmosphere. They talk a lot about how too where there's you can tell there's a clear difference between the staff and Fordyce, where the majority of the staff have very working class accents. They want to do a very working class thing where they want to get together and have a drink after work. They want to have a party. And when you think too about like how the one bank employee complains about how like, oh, I'm going to give up £2 for this. In those days, most people like a really good paying job was anywhere between like 20 to 30 pounds a month, I think. If or like that was like you're doing well. So think about like in a 30-day period, a pound is quite something. So when Andre Morel later on gives a £5 note to that one employee and she's like losing it, it's like, wow, all right, we're gonna have a really good time. It kind of gives you a quick context, like one, the state of the British economy at that time. I mean, I think even until then they were still using rations.
I think by that point they were out of the woods there, but you raise a really excellent point about this. And I know we talked the death of it in the last pod, but I guess, hey,
Right.
this is what we do. Class looms large in this film.
Very large, yeah.
Looms very large in this film. And I'm so glad you brought up the beginning, the opening shot after the credits. Give this holiday. Like
Yes.
it's setting they are setting the tone from jump. I
Entirely.
love
Yeah.
that.
Um,
Uh
there was also something too where so we can tell that the staff is very working class from their accents, the fact that this is their job and how much money it costs to give up, just for a party. Then you get to meet Fordyce. And I think this was a really great contrast where he walks in, he has boot slips, and he hands them to an employee without saying anything. Like you're just get rid of these. And then what's really interesting is he has a complete like pent up way of organization where how he hangs his coat, how he folds his scarf. Everything has its place. It's tidy. When he
how
walks
he
in,
fiddles with the things on his
he
desk,
he squares
fountain
his mat,
pen.
his writing mat. He squares it to make sure it's aligned with the desk. So we immediately, without any real words, establish that this is the guy who's clearly in charge, who's acting like this, and here's the plebs. Here's the rest of the people just working.
So before we delve into, the class aspects of this film, uh Cushing, and this is why I think this is one of his better performances for Hammer. As you so eloquently put it, without saying words, he conveys so many important traits about this character.
Yes.
And this was, I have down in my notes, because immediately while he's straightening out everything, I was reminded of his nickname at Hammer. The staff referred to him as Props Peter because he would always, regardless of the role, work out little things, little touches with, props. Uh, when he was he was acting or preparing for a role. My God, in the first like 5 minutes of this film, Props Peter is at it.
Everywhere. Yeah.
It I have down in my notes, and I think this is a very description. Fordyce is the human embodiment of Fordism. It's all about clocks, time, and order.
Right. Yeah.
Really, at least the beginning of the film, nothing else.
Exactly. And I kind of found like even when the tiny details where he chews out Pearson for the bad pen. And he's like, this reflects poorly on you. And he says something where he's like, it's not the duty of every general to inspect every button. That's the duty of his subordinates. Where
So
he sees it as like this is an army. I'm in charge. You are my subordinates.
I have that quote down in my notes as well, and I think that literally sums up this character's feeling about his employees. He is a general, and this bank is a barracks.
Yes, exactly.
And it as the film goes on, and particularly once you get the interchange between Cushing and Morell's character, you see this come out even more times where, Cushing straight up admits, I have zero interest in the lives of my employees. They're just there
Exactly. Yeah.
to fulfill a function, to fulfill a job. So we were talking about class here. I think it's really interesting though. So those of you who are unaware, and if you're unaware, I don't know where you've been. Uh, Class, particularly in Britain, rules everything around you.
Yes.
And indeed, even today, the class hierarchies, even though they don't necessarily mean as much as they did even in the 1960s, it's still very rigid. The employees, all, as you said, are clearly of sort of working class backgrounds. You hear it in the accents. You get a sense of it in terms of what they're interested in. But here's the thing. So Cushing has this clipped kind of middle class accent. Right. But class is a funny old thing. Because at the end of the day, this character is not the director of the bank. He's not even on the board of directors, although he does love to point out that he had dinner with
Yeah.
one of
Dinner was one of them.
one.
Yeah.
Dude is a manager of a provincial bank in bumfuck. So really at the end of the day, he's simply a hatchet man for the bourgeoisie. But because he is that hatchet man, he gets into this weird mimicry where he takes on these middle class values, these middle class ways of speech, this middle class way of dress, even though at the end of the day, dude, homie, you are simply a manager. You are an
Yeah.
errand boy. You are a better paid errand boy, but you're just an errand boy. You're not going to get on that board of directors because you didn't go to the right school. Or you're not Sir so and so's nephew.
What I kind of found when I was rewatching it again was that exactly in that line where Cushion is aspiring to be an upper class person from wherever, and we kind of don't have a full background on who he is in his personal life, if he actually comes from any sort of like upper or middle class echelon. But we can kind of tell that when he's in his most like panicked state, he's very vulnerable. So he has fears. We know he's human. But there's this interesting thing that I kind of found watching it where Cushing's character Fordyce is aspiring to be a middle class, upper class person, while Colonel Hepburn is mocking that and taking it
So,
on
so
to drive to his own gains. So
if
we don't know if he's from any sort of upper or middle class echelon, but he can play it really well and
well,
convincingly
and
to
that's just
take
it
his own
because
means.
considering his line of work, he probably is not. But this whole film, this whole scenario, because the thing is, you have to ask yourself the question, why does this rando get let into a bank vault in the first place?
So we
And without class and
exactly.
the British class system, he doesn't because Cushing aspires to be middle class, but he defers like every good Brit. There's that wonderful sketch with John Cleese and I think the two Ronnies, where it's lower class, middle
Middle,
class, upper
yes.
class, and it's I look down on
Down
him,
on you.
I look. Cushing is Ronnie Baker. He's right in the
Yes.
middle. As soon as someone with a title, a colonel nonetheless, who's driving a very nice car and has his own calling card, presents himself without asking any goddamn questions,
No.
without calling the insurance agency and be like, yo, you send somebody here today?
But
He just lets this guy in.
well, so there's a couple interesting things there. So it's Pearson who kind of falls for the first trap, where he hears the name, and that's something else too. Was there's that great line that one bank teller says, where he says, he goes, did you see that motor he had? And he goes, well, I
Yeah,
wasn't a colonel, I was a corporal.
I was a corporal, yeah.
So we also understand that the majority of these older gentlemen are more than likely veterans from the post-war era. So
Yeah, they
then
either
hearing colonel, immediately it's like you know it's like Pavlov's dog. They're just immediately like, oh, colonel's here. Oh, everyone to attention. So there was that he took advantage of, where he understood, like, if I refer to myself and present myself as a colonel, more than likely I'm not going to be questioned twice.
there's
And if I have,
also there's also a said unsaid there too, because if you're a colonel in the British Army, more likely than not, you come from an upper class background because
exactly,
British military, unlike the US military, unlike the Red Army, let's say in the Soviet Union, it was not a meritocracy.
no,
The
yeah,
officer corps was drawn from the old aristocratic families. Uh, so there's sort of, just by saying colonel, there's this assumption, oh, this guy is my social better. Let's he's on the level, right? He
but
can
in
possibly be
packaged with that came with the accent, the way he stood and presented himself, the clothes he wore, the car
the
he had.
car,
It
the
was a
cigarette
package deal
case.
to
Yep.
just essentially walk through the door. And so it's Pearson who first says, "Oh, all right. Well, you seem a." He said to he said to him, "Someone of consequence." When
Yes.
he said he seems like someone of consequence, which is a heavy way to describe someone.
Mhm.
And so he lets him in, and then sure enough, it turns on the dime where he's able to. And it was an interesting thing where we're talking about like the Christmas Carol parallels, where I feel like, all right, so in one way, Fordyce is Scrooge, Pearson is Cratchit, because he's the one who has kind of the pure heart to be like, I can see the error of my ways and I can fix them. And at the same time, I can recognize I have flaws. I may not do everything the right way, but I do it well enough. And then Colonel Hepburn is like all the ghosts.
I watched this film with Marie over the weekend, and she said she reached the same conclusion. She was
Yeah.
like, so Cushing's Scrooge, but Andre Morel is all three of the ghosts slammed together. And
Well,
I'm like,
what
yep.
Well, so the way the Colonel kind of acts as the ghost too, where he brings the present to, so like he talks about all these things, the past, present, and the future, and the way he brings them into the present is he has the phone call with his quote unquote wife and son, where then he kind of breaks them down to be like, you're not anyone of like he kind of makes it clear you're not anyone of consequence. I
Yes.
have your daughter, I have your wife and son locked up, and they're screaming for your help. You need to listen to me.
Mhm.
And just that alone is like where it buckles to be like, all right, now the power dynamic has shifted drastically. And then when you see Fordyce's first interaction with his employees after that interchange, he's nervous, he's unsure of himself, he can't really like he can't have the same authority. He has to be constantly looking to Morel's character to be like, oh, what do I say? What do I do? Am I doing okay? So it's still that class thing of him being like, he recognizes that whether or not this guy's actually a colonel, but certainly has a power authority over him, he buckles. And it kind of represents this strange British nature, right? Or not nature, but like this British consciousness where it's like, the, this guy Fordyce is the cock of the walk until this guy walks in, and that
Mhm.
seems very British to me. Where
Yes, it
I'm the top person of the block until that person comes
until
over who's the
until the
mayor.
guy further up on the stupid ladder shows up.
The pecking
And
order is in place.
yep,
There is a way this works, and there's a really interesting thing about how uh, again and again Hepburn kind of invokes these sort of things where he goes like, um, uh, what does he say? He says, "Oh, you know, it could be the robber more than likely is a slick London guy, a slick city Londoner. That's who you should worry about. We shouldn't be worried about these people in the provinces."
hmm
And again, reasserting that class, and then also about like how he kind of treats robbing the bank as a game, and the whole time he's like having fun with it, and like
it's a gay. He remarks because one of Fordyce's employees is a local chess champion.
that's right.
We'll talk about this because in some ways Fordyce and Hepburn are almost two sides of the same. They're almost the same person in some ways, but also
Yes,
radically different in that one, weirdly enough, the bank robber is a human being. Uh but
but
he he
there's go
he
ahead.
says he says, and I think this is where you go with he compares bank robbery to a game of chess.
Yes.
Yes.
And then there's a really interesting thing. There's two other like really interesting things where he talked about how he was just borrowing his family, and he kind of related that to the bank. He said that people are collateral. Like, I'm
Yes.
just going to borrow your
Yes.
family, just like I'm going to borrow this money. Like,
Yes.
that was a really interesting kind of correlation he made, where he's kind of like asserting to him like, what you do every day is no different from what I'm doing.
This film is not Marxist capital, ladies and gentlemen. But
No,
when I make the case, or we make the case, that this is kind of a riff on A Christmas Carol, there is some kind of not so subtle, let's say, critiques of
yes,
capitalism embedded throughout the film itself.
there's
Another, again, piggybacking on what we're sort of talking about, how does this guy get in? I think it's the same. Oh, uh, the gunman would be one of these slick London types, etc. And Hepburn, who is clearly having a ball
yeah,
throughout this whole process, uh, very casually just throws out there, well, how do you know what a gunman would look like?
exactly, yeah.
Throwing at them, it's like, I know what your prejudices, your social prejudices are.
There, there was a really good line he said where after what was it like after he slapped him, he said, "Don't misread my character."
Yes.
But the whole point of the film for me is that Cushing did that. he already did misread his character,
Yep.
where he accepted him as this lie he presented, and then just as quickly he's like, "No, that's bullshit. I'm here to rob you."
I'm here to rob you. I have your family held hostage.
So
Like,
it was kind of like a mockery. I felt where he's saying that to be like, "You're an idiot. You just let me in because I have a posh accent name, and you're like, I'm trying to reinforce it to you. Don't think I'm going to be nice. Don't think I'm going to like help you along or even free your family."
well,
Like,
he thinks the Fordyce is ridiculous, and even at the end of the film, when the robbery is foiled, he even says to the police, they're like, "How did you do it?" And he's like, "A tape recorder," right? Because I guess we'll spoil
yes,
the film. Cushing's wife and son are not being held hostage. Rather, it's a recording played over the telephone and a man with a switchboard. And the police are like, kind of looking at him and they're like, "Well, the man, do you mean Fordyce?" And he was like, "No, I don't work with such people."
but
So, I think one of the interesting things about this film too is, and I think this is what makes the interplay between the Cushing and Morel characters so great. They are wildly different in a lot of ways, but in so many ways they're also like they serve as weird foils to one another.
yes,
Cushing is detailed oriented, all about efficiency. So too is Morel, except his details are not the condition of the pen in the office or his scarf. It's the timetable of how this robbery is going to go. And I think this is the biggest difference. Morel knows more about Cushing's staff than Cushing does.
yes,
And he knows more about people, ultimately, than I think
yes.
Cushing does.
Well, wait. There's this interesting thing that you brought up about how Hepburn is detailed,
Mhm.
which is true because he says that he was planning it for over a year at that point,
Yep.
and he knew everything about what was in the bank, where it was going,
Exactly.
all that. But there's one really interesting point in the film that really got me was that at one point they think an alarm goes off and Morel loses it. He's like panicking. And then Fordyce is the one who assures him, he's like, no, 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 no. That's the fire engine around the corner. It must be a fire. And it made me pause for a minute. And I thought, if you were planning this for a year and staking this out, how did you not know about the fire engine? How did you overlook a detail like that? And it's something where I'm like, was he bullshitting him about planning this, or was he just that well read and smart that he was able to plan it in a couple months or a month? You're like, where is the bluff blur in there about Morel's character being like, we've been, like, and I know he's trying to assert a sort of an authority over him to show like how much he knows about the bank, but that one little detail to me seems like, how did he freak out? Like,
Well,
where's
there's two moments. There's the fire engine and there's the window cleaner.
that's right. He didn't know about the window
And
cleaner. That's
so
right.
you have to think, yeah, okay, he's planned this robbery out for time. He probably, however, has not been observing the premises.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Because, right, that's why you wouldn't know the fire engine and you wouldn't know that once a month some guy comes and cleans the windows. Because you wouldn't have gone necessarily on the day that the dude cleans
Good
the
point.
window.
Okay.
So
No, that was something that got me where I'm like, so was he like? Because again, it's that whole thing where even Fordyce is trying to bluff him, where he tries to bullshit him about how much money is actually in the vault. He
yep.
tries he tries to BS him about even when he feels like he's being found out, he's still trying to bullshit. Whereas Morel's character seems like he has no time for that or even patience for it. He's just really direct and to the point. So it makes you feel like he's somebody who planned all this. But when you see those little moments, you're like, all right, how well did he actually do that? Did he? No one's perfect, but it's a thing where it's like those seem like pretty big details in a robbery. Um,
Well, but Yes, but I guess I would suggest though that the intel, because here's the other thing too. You have to get a sense of what the dynamic in that bank branch is, and dare I say who Fordyce is, in
Yeah,
order for this thing to sort of work. Because uh he knows all of the levers to push, all of the buttons to sort of press. Uh but yeah, that's a fair point. I have in my notes actually not the fire engine, but the window cleaner.
yeah. No, that was something
Because
that
I
was
was like,
true. Yeah,
wait, he probably would have known that.
if he was casing it, yeah,
And
like
there's
that.
also, talking about bluffing, there's this big point of making signals to some
Yes,
seeing
and
the
wiping
cop,
the brow, and yeah,
wiping his brow, lighting up a cig. I, you get the sense when the film is resolved, there is no one across that street.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, no,
That's just bullshit. That's
he's just
part of
messing with
the act. That's
it.
complete and utter bullshit. Shameless bullshit. Uh so yeah. One thing that I have down in my notes too that I threw out there that we might want to talk about uh in the original show notes was, even though this is mainly a Cushing Morel joint, you do get to see a little bit of the other employees. Their characters aren't completely fleshed out, but you
Yeah.
get a sense of it. So this film was made in the early 60s, and I'm a big proponent, and Paul, you being a trained historian, you know this term, of the whole concept of what I call the long 60s,
Mm-hmm.
where really the real change in the post-war period, particularly from a cultural level, really only starts like in the mid 50s and
Yeah.
really didn't end until like the Jimmy Carter years.
Yeah.
Uh, so like when we talk about the 60s, it's not 1960 to 1969. It's
No, there's over,
like
but yeah.
really like 1954 to about 1978. The two young employees, I think you see little aspects of this emerging kind of new Britain there.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, if this movie was made 7, 8 years earlier, those two characters are written and portrayed, I think, extremely differently.
Yes.
The young male certainly doesn't, complain of coming in with a hangover. Uh,
No.
there's no obvious flirtations between the two. Uh, and it's funny, it's one of the older characters that mentions this. Youth culture as we understand it did not really exist in Britain, I don't know, until about like the end of the Korean War and the emergence of sort of the British rock and roll scene and the
Well,
sort
even at
of
even at the
subcultures.
even
Go
at this point in British culture, there is regional popular acts like Tommy Steele or Cliff Richards. You know, like there are these like sort of rock and roll acts that are regionally popular, but there is no national real big figure. A lot of the popular music is American
yes,
because it was all imported stuff. So Elvis is huge, obviously, at this point. Little Richard is huge at this point. Even Chuck Berry, like it's just before the break of the Beatles and what was called the British invasion, where it's because I mean, I would argue until the day is long, it's the Beatles that are the first British package that goes international and that goes national in Britain. At this point, you have like these Americanized or this American culture that's being rinsed through a British lens, like Teddy Boys or so. Like even
yes.
the
That's what I was.
the
That's what I
teller's
was sort of
hair has
getting at. Yeah,
that one teller's hair has a tinge of a Teddy Boy feel because of how
I have.
it's slicked and how he wants to dance and drink and just have a good time. And that's very much what the vibe was
Well,
with
and even the verbiage, the old
the
lady
verbiage.
says, when Peter is saying something to his female younger coworker Sally, Mrs. Pringle says he's asking you whether you're a hep cat or a square,
Where?
and it's
Yeah.
like that is that American youth culture sort of coming over to the British shores. And okay, so you don't have an official British sort of homegrown variant of it.
Yeah.
You see that that's starting to emerge, it's starting to come, and this British baby boom generation, because every country after the war had their own baby boom generation. That sort of, youth culture, and that youth culture based around consumption. Because for the first time for a lot of Brits, particularly working class Brits, the post-war years, the 50s, early 60s, was the first time that they could sort of independently consume. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that, I think you see elements of that in a very subtle way, but I think it's very interesting because, again, if this movie had been made 5, 6, 7 years earlier, I don't think those two younger characters are, I think they're portrayed dramatically different.
I don't think they would have had the same accents because even
Yeah.
by this point, the what was considerably a working class northern accent of any of those sort of are slowly starting to make their way more into the mainstream.
And that's a very good point because I have down in my notes, you are hearing regional working class accents.
Yes.
We haven't come to the point of Alfie where our
No.
protagonist is working class,
Yeah.
but the working class and young working class people are allowed to be seen and heard. And that's kind of a big deal because if you look at British cinema, even in the early 50s, it still feels a lot like it's the 1930s.
Well, yeah, and so this is kind of the Britain that's like post Goons and Saturday Morning Club.
Yep.
Like if, as you put it, if it was 7 years earlier, it would have been before that, where there are like because I think really a lot of British popular culture from like the 30s on, honestly, is really derived from American popular culture. It's heavily reliant on it, whether it's comedy or music or whatever, film. Name like film, especially where
Yes.
American films were huge in Britain, especially as they started coming over after the war. They
It's why after the war Britain does the quota system with their
exactly
to guarantee that they have a fucking film industry,
they have a homegrown industry.
yeah, enough, a certain number of homemade film, domestic films had to be shown in British cinemas per year to effectively ensure the industry's survival.
And this was getting into like early days of like Mary Quaint and that sort of thing, where they're just on the cusp of like this kind of British breakthrough of culture, where the hair is going to start coming down, the skirts are going to get shorter, that sort of thing. Where this is still having that kind of erudite feel to it, where everyone's still very much in tie and well slicked, mannered, dressed in hair. Uh, you know, but I think this film, in one way, kind of represents a small shift culturally, a lens in that respect, where you can kind of see if you watched a film from Britain, I would guarantee from like 2 years before, it would be a little more stiff. Where this is just starting to loosen up. Like you can
Yeah.
feel that it has that kind of that kind of vibe to it.
We haven't hit the 60s proper yet,
No,
but
yeah,
the signs are already kind of
they're
slowly
all there.
there.
Yeah.
So, the last main point that I wanted to address, and we've been touching on it, before I saw this film for the first time, someone described this film to me as kind of a weird, the closest thing Hammer ever did to a Christmas Carol without doing a Christmas Carol.
Yes.
And then I read the plot description and I was like, what the F is this person talking about? Then I watched the movie and I was like, oh shit, they're right.
I can kind of see it. Yeah.
So I wanted to throw it out here for discussion, and then we can just wrap it all up. I I buy that. I
I
think
buy it.
this is Hammer's Christmas Carol, but done in the most non-typical Hammer way imaginable because there is no supernatural. Uh Fordyce for me is Scrooge. He's sort of an updated Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yes.
Right, but he's Scrooge nonetheless. Uh, and through because let's be real, in Dickens' original source material, the Night of the Three Spirits is traumatic. Like
Yes.
these three ghosts literally shake this guy out of his internalized, capitalism and greed. And, he emerges the next day transformed. Through the trauma of this bank heist and the kidnapping, which ultimately wasn't, but man, did he not know that
Yeah.
you get this transformation and not I should say not a complete transformation because when I watched the film with my dear wife over the weekend, she raised a really good point. She's like, at the end it's like he's changed, but he's not a fully fledged human being yet. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh hell no, because he's just been birthed. Like
Yeah.
he just come out of the womb in terms of this species we call human. But you could tell, from again some of those subtle gestures Cushing makes towards the end, and the fact that he has to rely upon his staff.
Yes. That's the big
That
turnaround.
is that for me is huge. He sees for the first time these people not as tools,
But as people,
but as people.
it's really big when the police come to investigate for the first time and he realizes his staff kind of get wind of what's going on and they jump in to help. And before
Yes.
he goes back with the inspector, he kind of gives them this forlorn look of like, I'm sorry. I'm now realizing you were all here to help me. Like,
That's
it's,
exactly it.
yeah,
And it's that moment because I think his default brain would have been like, no, these people are not going to cover for me because they're going to do it by the book because
yeah,
that's the way that I do it by the book. And then once he realizes, no, these people really care about me, and what people do is actually care about each other and not simply do it. I
it's
once
not
wrote that
transactional.
it's not transactional and it's not a book. One of the most
Yeah,
disturbing things anyone's ever said to me. I once knew this guy who said, I find people fascinating because I read them like books. And I was like, that's terribly dehumanizing and kind of fucked up. Because people are complex and they're constantly, if they're books, they're constantly being like rewritten.
written and
Uh,
changed. Yeah,
and yeah,
edited.
that's pretty disturbing of you. Uh, that's the moment where Cushing sort of discovers. And again, at the end of the film, I don't think he's fully gotten it, but he discovers this thing
No, yeah,
we call humanity. You brought up the transactional. So I have down here in my notes A Christmas Carol, and indeed damn near every great Christmas movie. Uh, uh, It's a Wonderful Life, for example.
yeah,
One way, shape, or form have a again, it's not full on, but they all have this weird critique of capitalism, or at least the worst aspects of
yes,
capitalism. You see that in Dickens, certainly. And I think you see that in this film as well.
yes,
Uh, because I think Cushing's character at his worst represents the cold, the heartless, the efficiency. In fact, there's a point. This is how much he doesn't understand humans earlier in the film. Uh, when he's in his office with Andre Morel, Morel mentions that he knows everything about all of the people that work under him. And by this point, it's pretty evident
he
he knows
makes it his business to know this.
to
Yeah,
know these things. And, Cushing uh effectively says, I don't care about that. And he's like, effectively, Hepburn gets to the point where he's like, well, do they respect you? And Cushing's like, they respect me for my efficiency, which is the most psychotic, like, robot capitalist answer on the
Yeah,
planet.
exactly.
And it's funny because immediately Morel's character's like, oh, what about your family? They respect you for your efficiency, dickhead. Uh,
Or even when he points out, like he's like when it was a fake recording, but it's a recording. The way he faked it, it was believable to Fordyce, where he says, "Oh, she said beseech." It doesn't sound like someone who's often to mercy.
precisely.
And
Precisely.
but he, even though he faked it, he knew him well enough to understand that in that fake in he would buy that. That's kind
Exactly.
of disturbing. Where
Which
it's
is
like,
disturbing because that's not how my wife speaks to me,
no,
nor
it's not how
your
anybody
wife
speaks
speaks
to
to
somebody.
you, because we are,
Beseech, yeah,
yeah, beseech. Uh, right. And the fact that the kid was asking for his mother, not
right.
his father.
Not his father.
What is
Yeah.
his relationship with his father if it's merely this kind of, psycho Fordist model of the world brought to home? So there's this in Dickens. I think in Dickens it's right there. It's not even subtext, it's text. But even in this film too, there is this kind of not in your face, but it's there, critique of sort of certain aspects of the capitalist system. And the fact that it
Yes.
occurs in a bank, I think, is
Poignant.
essential there.
Yeah.
Uh, and the last thing I would like to say, at least in terms of this, is, and I think you had some points about this as well. In Dickens, you have three spirits. In this, you have a slick bank robber from London. Uh, but they serve very similar, not just roles, but I like how you said the Morel character, because of the nature of this heist and the timetable. Time is very important in this movie,
Yes.
which I think also goes back to the critique of capitalism. Time is quite literally money, uh,
Money.
especially in this context. He the trauma that Cushing has to go through and which leads to the transformation involves the past, the present, and also the future.
Yeah.
So if you've exhausted, dear audience, all of the versions of A Christmas Carol, and you've watched The Muppets, you've watched,
Watched it today.
Monster
It's great.
Slim. I love The Muppet Christmas
It
Carol.
holds up. I love that Christmas Carol.
You watch Scrooge from the 80s,
Hell
uh,
yeah.
which is also weirdly anti-capitalist.
It is. Oh, we watched that the other night, and that's all
Yeah,
about consumerism.
exactly. It
How
was done
things.
during the Reagan era. It's the Christmas Carol for the Reagan era.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're looking for something completely different, give Cash on Demand a watch because it's the same story, but done in a very different, very clever fashion, and I think it's worth your time. And on that note, Paul, sum up what you liked, why should our dear audience go see this film?
I think it's a good movie because it sums up a lot about how position and greed can kind of taint people and make them cold and indifferent to other people, especially when it's a power dynamic in a work setting. And that no matter what, there's always some slick bastard who comes along and can fuck up that entire dynamic. And the thing I loved about Morel's character was that he understood the game well enough to understand, like, I could win or lose, I'm fine. Like, I'm going to take the chance to take kind of the easy way out of this.
Which
You're
is
going to be the one
why,
who's going to be the follow the rules and be really just uptight about all this, and you're going to lose everything because you can't enjoy your life. I can. And I kind of loved that insane kind of thing because it kind of represents the two sides of like inanity and capitalism. You can either work yourself to death in this kind of bent, rigid way, or it's like, all right, like, I
I
give up.
re I recently recorded an episode for Steve Turk's podcast, the Diecast, uh, on the absolute classic, one of my favorite movies, The Harder They Come.
Yeah, oh yeah,
I am not saying that Andre Morel's character is Jimmy Cliff, but there is an aspect, I think, of kind of sort of, I don't want to go fully and say social banditry, but I get the sense that Morel's character is not of the higher classes. He just understands how to play the
play
game.
it. Yeah,
And you find yourself at least two-thirds of the way, even though he's threatening to do these horrible things to this man's family, of almost rooting for the man because
same. Yeah,
he is putting the hatchet boys of this system that's based on inequality in their place.
yeah,
And he's rejecting this. You have to go to work and just be a tool and follow orders. No, you can get, in the words of, one of the songs from said film, you can get it if you really want.
there you go. Yeah,
I want to second that. I think there's a lot of very interesting themes in this film, uh, which you, dear audience, can explore. I will also step up to the plate for this movie because for those who can't see Hammer beyond Hammer's Gothics, for those who can't see Peter Cushing beyond Sherlock Holmes, Van Helsing, Victor Frankenstein, you really need to see this film because I think it's a very accessible, because it's relatively short too, right? It's like
yeah.
minutes. So it's a little under,
Hour 20. Yeah,
yeah, hour and 20. A very accessible little film that can serve as a gateway drug to get into the Hammer stuff, the non-Gothic Hammer stuff, because there's a lot of great stuff they did that wasn't strictly Gothic that I think gets short-saddled. And the other reason why I will pimp said film is, uh, if you want to see a film that is tight, neat, and character driven, which I think is part of the issue with today's talk about capitalism, multi-billion dollar, this is your Hollywood brought to you by the Coca-Cola Corporation. This is a film for you. It is
yeah.
effectively two really adept actors giving two of what I would argue is their best performances. And on that note, Paul, thank you, thank you, thank you for choosing this film because I always rewatch around this time of the year, but this just gave me another excuse to and to deep dive it even more than I normally would.
Hell
And
yeah.
to all of you, Paul, Tina, producer Stead, our lovely audience, I hope you have a very wonderful holiday season. Be safe, be sound. Me and Dina will probably be back with you next month with another short, but we'll figure that out. Paul, I have some thoughts in terms of maybe a series of shorts we could do too, but
Sick.
we'll we'll talk off air over pints about
Yes.
that. And join us for the last of our first sort of series of episodes, which is going to be in February of the new year, where we talk about a film that is kind of British, kind of not British, but it's British enough that it made the cut. It's Dina's pick, and it's my favorite Jesus Franco film, Venus and Furs. Paul, have
Oh
you ever
yeah,
seen
okay.
Venus and Furs?
Yeah, oh
It's
yeah.
it's going to be a fun one. And as it is the holiday season and it's time for merriment, if I can make a quick recommendation, the beer I'm drinking this evening
I
is
knew it.
Samuel Smith's Winter Welcome, which is my favorite holiday beer because
Good beer.
it's just ale. It's just ale, ladies and gentlemen. There's no allspice, there's no nutmeg, it's not high alcohol by volume. It actually tastes like drinking ale and not like some kind of horrid gingerbread cookie meets Vicks Formula 44 from hell. So get a couple bottles of this, watch Cash on Demand, and have a wonderful holiday. And we'll be seeing you on the other side. Peace out, friends.
Cheers.